Kia ora. I am so excited to share with you this upcoming sets of interventions we are going to create at CARE for the month of March 2020. This is a recognition and a remembrance of the white supremacist terrorist attack in Christchurch. It is also an invitation for us to imagine a world that is free of racism. So our series for 2020 is titled Anti-Racism, Imagining a New Future. As part of this series, we will have activists, communication advocates, academics talking about various aspects of racism, how it impacts our lives, and most importantly, what are the kinds of communication solutions we can create to address racism, placing the voices of minority communities, indigenous communities, communities of color, migrants and refugees at the center. The culture-centered approach grapples with the question, what really happens to the discursive and communicative infrastructure when we place the voices of the margins at the center? So as part of that conversation, we will begin by locating our own bodies, our own voices, our own experiences navigating racism, as well as developing interventions addressing racism. Part of this work is disrupting the colonizing structures that inhabit universities, starting to question and interrogate the very nature of colonization that constitutes the architecture of academia. So I'm really excited that we are going to actually begin our conversations for the next couple of months by talking to the research team and talking to research team members. Today we are going to speak with Christine Elers, who goes by the Maori name Ng Hau. And Christine is a research assistant with the Center for Culture-Centered Approach to Research and Evaluation. She does some incredible work looking at questions of indigenous sovereignty, indigenous health and well-being, as well as foregrounding notions of Tinoranga Tiratanga at the center of how we think about communication and discursive architectures. So Christine comes with us with experience in law and with experience running a school, a Maori school. So really, we are very excited to chat with you, Christine, because of the tremendous world experiences and life experiences that you bring to this conversation. So let's begin by perhaps talking a little bit about how you would like to introduce yourself.
Ko ruahine te pai maunga, ko Aotearoa, ko taino i te waka, ko Ngāti Kaupata te iwi, ko Ng Hau e whao te motu tōku ingoa Māori, ko Christine tōku ingoa Pākehā. Kia ora.
Kia ora. So Christine, let's talk a little bit about your work with CARE and what you do at the centre.
Okay, I am a junior researcher and I've been at CARE since May last year. At the moment I'm involved in 3 projects. One is examining the meanings of Māori health and wellbeing. When I say examining the meanings, I mean at the coalface, by the people themselves, by the whānau in the Māori community themselves in Ngāti Kaupata. Some whānau who have generously shared with me their positioning on Māori health, what that means to them. And that canvassed a whole lot of areas, including land, racism, education, employment, housing, poverty. There were some really beautiful articulations. And then from there, I have assisted in the I Choose Highbury campaign, and just recently I've also assisted with the anti-racism campaign that's just started last week.
So, how in this work that you have done so far have you seen racism as a concept emerge?
I've seen it through dialogue with our whānau participants, that racism is very much entrenched in Aotearoa, New Zealand. In fact, I would even go as far as to say as it's part of the Kiwi DNA and infrastructure of this society. Yeah.
Wow. So what makes it a part of the Kiwi DNA?
I think there's a whole lot of factors, but primarily colonisation underpins it. Yeah, racism, white supremacy, colonisation. There's a almost intentional misremembering or an amnesia about how, sorry, I'm gonna cry. Yeah. There's an intentional amnesia around that to prop up whiteness.
This is a powerful point, this notion of intentional amnesia. Think of that as sort of a strategic erasure, sort of how you create a story or a narrative to strategically erase the racism that actually exists.
Yeah.
Right? So, sort of the picture of Aotearoa, New Zealand that you see being projected is one of a kind society that is based on the idea of the treaty. That sometimes perhaps is challenged by people's lived experiences, isn't it?
Yes, very much so, I think. There's a whole lot of structural inequalities that are the outcomes of this entrenched racism. I think that just from reading on social media, your typical Kiwi responses doesn't even consider or wish to know the 250 years that got us to this situation in the first place. There's a general feeling of just, that happened in the past, get over it. Yeah. But I guess in listening to communities, Indigenous communities, I'd say that that's a narrative, like you said, that erases that historical trauma, and that it is still a consequence, it's still an outcome today because it's passed through the generations. It's even affected, to the point of cellular invasion, in that micro level, in terms of whānau experiences of racism. Yeah.
How does this cellular invasion sort of play out? Do you mean like it plays out on the body, it's felt in the body?
Yes. Yeah. So our ancestors, our parents' stories of racism, even though we weren't there in the 1800s or the early 1900s, I guess we still feel that hurt through them, through their experiences. And those experiences are even told in some of our mōteatea, our traditional songs. Yeah. So if you are, if you're able to get in the space to learn that, then that's just a constant reminder as well. Yeah, of the racism and the trauma that they experienced. Yeah.
Two questions. One, you talk about sort of the structural aspects of racism that exist in New Zealand society. What do you mean by that? Could you share some examples?
Well, if you're a Māori or a person of colour and you go to try to access some kind of service, whether that health, education, there are structural inequalities. You may not get treated the same as a Pākehā person. looked down upon. The aspirations or the motivation to assist you to pursue your goals isn't necessarily, or doesn't come across as what's the word I'm looking for, as valid, as honest. You know, just a name on a bit of paper. Next. Yeah.
Now, one of the structures we inhabit while doing this work is the university, academia. How do those kinds of racist formations play out within universities as structures?
Oh gosh, I think they're everywhere. I recall when I was a university student taking an assignment there was a English help thing that could read your assignment and give you feedback on grammar. Instead, the lady, Pākehā lady, chose not to give me feedback on grammar, but rather on the content, which was about racism. And instead she purported to tell me that we were racist, Māori was racist and sexist. And I was just like, I haven't come for that. Like, your role is the grammar. Yeah. Yeah. I think it pervades in universities, racism. And, my daughter possibly could be going to university next year, and it scares me. Yeah.
Now, you have shared with me stories about your daughter's navigation, and share those only if you feel comfortable. But it seems like some threads there relate to sort of this sense of fear that you feel about her going into a university as well, right?
Yes. I worry that she'd just be a number, that for her to engage meaningfully in a subject, she needs to feel valued. Yeah. Not just another face, not just another name or a number. Not only that, the content of the curriculum, whatever that may be, that she might choose to pursue, maybe so foreign and alien to her that she won't invest her time or energy into it. And even if the content isn't foreign, the way that that's delivered, she can pick up on whether that's heartfelt or not. Yeah. For example, she's in school at the moment, learning about the Treaty of Waitangi. She hates it. She doesn't hate the Treaty of Waitangi, she hates learning about it the way that she's learning about it. So there's historical information, right, that's transmitted from teacher to student, but just in the way that that's transmitted, in the tone, in the selection of words used, she comes home feeling like our ancestors were dumb. Yeah, that's the way that the information has been conveyed to her. Dumb for signing the treaty. Why would you sign it when all you got were blankets? That sort of a impression. So then I have to fix that up at home.
How do you fix that up?
By referring her to other readings. Yeah. And they're more so in school. They're watching videos. I refer her to different ones. It's almost like a blackout list of what not to read or watch. Yeah.
So you almost have to work at creating an alternative pedagogy.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But you also bring up a powerful point, I think, which is sort of the inclusion of the Treaty of Waitangi, for example, as an element of the pedagogy or element of the curriculum or the element of the structure. A is not enough,
Yes.
but B can actually work to perpetuate further disenfranchisement of Maori peoples.
Yes. Yeah. So, and I question teachers that teach that, you know, their intent. What is your intent behind that before you teach it? I think they need to question themselves about that, particularly when you're standing in front of a class full of Māori students. Yeah, if you aren't prepared to interrogate your own views on it, then don't put yourself in front of our kids. That's my view. Do more damage than anything. You'd rather just tell them to research it themselves. They'd come up with a better analysis themselves. They're very quite capable of that. Yeah.
So do you see the treaty as a positive resource?
The Treaty of Waitangi, Te Tiriti of Waitangi. Well, gosh, I think there needs to be some kind of constitutional transformation that does more than give lip service to it. And until that happens, until there's some real structural transformation around that, then this is what we're going to have to endure, and our children and their children.
So what's the kind of constitutional transformation that could happen that sort of would be a positive anchor to deploying the treaty toward, positive goals that are meaningful to Maori?
I think Moana Jackson's done some research on done some recent research on constitutional transformation. I think it needs to be entrenched into the documents that form our constitution, but really that should come from the ground up, rather than at a political expert level. But perhaps even prior to that, maybe, I don't even know if our communities themselves have been asked about that. What does the Te Tiriti or Waitangi mean to you? It's a lot of groundwork, I think, that needs to be done. Yeah.
Does that not happen? So say for instance, when you have the Te Tiriti o Waitangi hearings, do the voices from the ground not emerge through those?
Well, it's a quasi-judicial body, so it's like a court hearing where you have lawyers and there's cross-examination of your witnesses, and those witnesses typically are your expert witnesses, or they come through the lawyers themselves or the historians. So for the first part of that, in our one next month, it's the experts. Yeah. And then in May, possibly the community, the whānau. Yeah, because the Crown lawyers, have that right to cross-examine everybody. Yeah. That speaks. And they will dig, because they want to put holes in your evidence. Yeah.
So, it's really interesting because that instrument, much like many other instruments that can be emancipatory, could also be deeply colonial and reproduce the structures of racism and divide and rule.
Yeah, very much so. Yes, that's the process, or the court process that we have to go through if we want to pursue that. There is no other avenue currently.
So what happens? So let's connect this to the question of racism. So what happens when, say, a Maori student or a Maori employee in an organization experiences racism? What mechanisms do they usually have available to them?
Legal mechanisms?
Yes.
You can raise it via your employment agreement. There's also the Human Rights Commission as well. But I understand I don't think, I was looking on the Human Rights Commission last week, not very many complaints. They don't receive very many complaints. And it's a arduous process. Gosh, it's almost like a full-time job just to, you know, get that process in motion. I think if the process was simpler, that might help. And also who makes the decision on that at the end of the day as well. Yeah, just that the freedom of speech kaupapa that we've been researching recently, the test for that, for hate speech is so high that it's almost impossible to ever win that in a court of law. Yeah.
So let's take Hobsons Pledge as an example.
Yeah.
How does one litigate against that kind of racist speech?
Well, if you go through the courts, you're not going to get any success there, I don't believe. First, you have to prove that the speech or the hate speech could cause injury. That's okay. But then the next test is that you have to prove that the person intended to incite hatred, and it's a objective test. This reasonable person test that doesn't exist. That's usually a white person. From that standpoint, the courts will determine whether or not freedom of speech or freedom of expression incited hatred.
So this is a great example.
Yeah.
Because the way in which then that structure is set up in terms of what counts and how it is going to count are embedded within, it seems like, logics of whiteness.
Oh yes, very much so. Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about whiteness, what that construct is, and connect it to sort of perhaps these processes or norms within structures and the ways in which those are set up?
Okay, well, I understand it to be structural advantage, the ideology of whiteness, structural advantage based on past and present, subordination of people of colour, a superior complex, and how that's connected to structural inequalities. It pervades structure, like just as we were talking about the court system. There's no escaping it. Should you, raise a complaint, then that complaint is going to be judged or determined or reasoned within that structure. So of course all you're going to get is a decision that's soaked in whiteness. There's no other option. Yeah.
See, I find this really powerful now, because it seems like then if you want to decolonize, right, that part of our work has to be about interrogating these very normative ideas and logics rather than taking them for granted and starting to work with them. I mean, we know we have to work with them in order to get somewhere. But at the same time, it seems like we have to do the work of dismantling them and making visible their taken for granted assumptions.
Yes, I'm not too sure whether they're fully aware of it themselves. The whiteness of the structures and the immense privilege that exists in there. I think some people are, but I think a lot of people are oblivious to it. Yeah. I was just this morning with my daughter talking to her dean about a possible program that she might do. And straight off the bat, I could see the privilege in that, this is only for this certain type of people, but she couldn't see that. I had to point it out. Yeah. But otherwise, there's a there's a thinking of if you just try hard, if you're just motivated enough, you'll succeed. Well, no, it's not that simple. Yeah, it's not about motivation or trying. There are some structural obstacles that prevent you from even trying in the first place. Yeah.
And those obstacles are written in codes of whiteness.
Yes. So rather than turning that back on the individual and saying, oh, well, you didn't try hard enough, well, no, actually, have a look at your processes. Yeah. How open are they? And receptive are they for all people, and not just those that have privilege, that are able to afford to do that, or are able to get themselves to here and there on a weekly basis. So have you thought through that? No. Yeah.
So, what I find really fascinating here is how sort of the logic of whiteness sets up certain norms and expectations, and in this process excludes and creates the margins, right? But then goes on to reproduce racist arguments, such as, oh, this particular community has underachieved,
yeah,
or has a higher rate of delinquency or a higher rate of crime.
Yes. Yeah.
So, how does one, you gave the example of speaking with your daughter, because it seems like a lot of it is internalized. Internalized by peoples who are colonized, because that's how the colonizing epistemology works, right? So how do we learn to interrogate that and question that?
Well, I'm amazed at children, how much they can detect and pick up, just from body language. Like I said, the tone, it just blows me away. Yeah. I mean, I think they should be teaching the class sometimes, not the other way around. And I mean, it's really all I can hope for as a parent, is that through our interactions as a whānau, that they're able to decipher, because there's a lot of deciphering that goes on. I wouldn't say authentic, it's the only word I can come up with, but really meaningful pedagogy that really engages them, and then just cut out that which doesn't. It's quite difficult for them to challenge that in a school environment, because you're threatened with a lot of disciplinary action. But yeah, we talk a lot about it at home. Yeah. Well, frequently, weekly at least. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you pick up from that, Ng Hau, and take questions such as, say, violence, or what is considered as crime within a particular context, how does one set up a dialogic space between recognizing the whiteness and the colonial architecture, and at the same time addressing sort of the oppressive effects of violence within the immediate contexts of, say, a whanau or an iwi?
Oh, I think, well, you do your best, the best that you can at the time, with whānau, lots of dialogue and discussion around that. No, not everybody's going to agree, and that's okay too. The main thing is that there is discussion. How do you kind of reconcile that, you mean? Well, crime or violence is in every culture and every institution. May not necessarily be physical, but there might be, I think sometimes when Pākehā people launch into research about Māori, that can be violent, particularly in the tone and the way that they carry themselves. That can be hugely violent and cause trauma. I think it's not limited to minority cultures or Māori, and that does exist is primarily a result of colonisation. Yeah.
You know, this part I find so powerful, because part of the idea here is that what gets framed in the cultural label and what kinds of cultural labels otherwise are erased or absent. Going back to your question of memory making, right? So we don't talk about Pakeha culture being violent, although we might have enough ample empirical evidence to document that and then to frame that as a culturalist argument, right? So think, you know, how you pick particular statistics and use certain labels to frame those statistics itself is a deeply ideological act that is embedded within a racist structure.
Yes, yes. For the purpose of bolstering themselves, yeah, that as the supremacists. Yeah, and I think it's tied up with wealth and assets as well. Yeah, and to be able to say, see, that's why certain cultures don't live as long or aren't as healthy. Yeah. It's their fault, the crimes they commit. Yeah, that sort of an argument.
Right,
Yeah.
which then upholds, like you're saying, white supremacy.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't turn around and ask, you know, I study health, and I'm amazed at how often we don't say that, oh, you know, this culture of eating fast food, McDonald's and KFC,
Yes.
that's white culture.
Yes.
That's whiteness and white culture, and how it is killing
It
us
is.
all through its colonizing processes. Right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that I think we struggle in our work is that just making these kinds of arguments, like what you and I are doing right now, brings backlash from the white structure. So that's part of the racism as well that one has to navigate
Yes.
when, as academics or activists, we do this work. How do you feel about that, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's, you know what's going to happen. For the most part, well, I can give a most recent example, our whenua occupation, and well, the backlash from that from the immediate community, or one resident actually. She turned it back on to our aunties and said that they were selfish for stopping the stop bank on their land. It was a selfish act. Now, well, for me personally, I just thought, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Didn't particularly worry me, but it worried other members in our whānau, you know, like it enraged them, because we know that our aunties aren't selfish. You know, they give and give. They'd give you, you know, the last, anything that they had. That's who they are. But I think the media was integral in bolstering that argument, because they purposely sorted out, you know, sort out somebody who would speak out against the land occupation. And I mean, over you know, with as you get older, you come to expect that because you see it all the time.
So the media as structures of storytelling
Yes.
are embedded in logics of whiteness. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So you anticipate that. How do you navigate that, but also how do you resist that then?
Well, you try not to get your cousins to beat them up. That in itself takes a lot of dialogue.
So in terms of the kinds of response you're going to have,
yes,
right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. You know, honestly, you try not to get them to beat them up. And then, unfortunately, with Kia, we had a platform. were able to utilise our platform here to put out their own stories that weren't twisted. Yeah, that was vital.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now, to me, this seems like a vital element of what we do at CARE, is to say that if these kinds of communication infrastructures reproduce this racist colonial ideology, we need to create alternative infrastructures that are sovereign, that are not owned by these hegemonic colonial institutions.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you think we sustain that?
We here at CARE.
Here at CARE, or even within a movement, say Ihu Matao, when they create this beautiful way of telling their stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not too sure how they sustained it. I mean, it looked from the outside, looking in, it looked very well resourced. I don't know how many communities or whānau have access to that. We're just lucky that we were able to access that through CARE. I don't know, I've seen on Facebook there is another whānau around the East Coast area that have just started their land occupation as well, and they're going live on Facebook. I think you just reach out to or use networks within your communities, try and find a way of doing that, or if worst comes to worst, then just going live on your phone. Yeah.
So do you find these digital technologies are playing a role in sort of at least disrupting some of the colonialism and racism?
Yes, yeah, I think very much so, yeah. Compared to say 10, 20 years ago, when all you had was the media, or if you wrote a letter to the editor, and it would be abridged anyway, you sort of didn't have any control over that. Yeah.
Do you see change happening?
In the near future, I'm hopeful, that change would happen. I think that it might get worse before it gets better. I think that, we really need to look after our children and prep them as best we can, because I think it's going to be worse in there when they're older than what I've experienced. And why I think that is because of the huge gap, the inequalities in wealth that exist now. That didn't seem to be so severe when I was growing up. It's hugely severe now. Like in Fielding there wasn't homelessness when I was growing up. Yeah. And just in my mum's generation, it was the whole urbanisation drift. So I think the next generation has got a whole lot more obstacles to get through. Yeah.
So what do you think we could do as CARE in our work to sort of address some of these immediate challenges, but that also seem to have a really long-term impact,
I think we might need some more staff, more community researchers.
Yes.
I'm not too sure if being cited here at the university is something that's appealing to our community people to come here. Yeah. It takes a lot of courage to come here is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, to the university.
So think also about the spaces where we situate our infrastructures, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so sort of let's start wrapping up. I want to ask you, in terms of addressing, we began by talking about racism and the history of racism that has been erased. What then can be done? We have Anti-Racism 2020.
Oh, yes.
What then can be done through that platform to address racism?
Well, in Fielding we're working on a kaupapa at the moment, a campaign at the moment, that is based on anti-racism, or it's what we say matters, across a whole range of subjects. And I just think chipping away little by little, ensuring that our whānau, particularly those that reside on the margins, that their voices emerge through, that together we continue to co-construct those infrastructures, voice and listening, because I think even in our iwi structure, decisions are made at a level that doesn't include the margins of the margins, albeit, you know, with the best intention, but still the best intention is not the same as having ownership by the people themselves.
So that's the ongoing challenge, really, for building these infrastructures for voices, especially those that are experiencing the inequalities, the material inequalities, as well as the voice inequalities.
Yes, they seem to go hand in hand.
Yes.
Yeah, they're intertwined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So as we wrap up, do you have any remaining thoughts or any questions you want to ask me?
In terms of our anti-racism campaign that we're about going to launch into, what are your hopes for it?
You know, actually, I resonate a lot with what you just said. My hopes are that we listen to those voices, because let's go back to what you started us with, saying that there have been systematic erasures that are not accidental, they are by design. The erasures of experiences of racism, experiences of colonization and violence. So my hope is that once we work on co-constructing these infrastructures, that we have plurality of voices, many different voices that articulate their everyday experiences, their everyday negotiations, and also offer us pathways for imagining other futures that are just, that are not racist, that are based on valuing different ways of knowing and respecting the world, you know?
Yeah, those reimaginings are really vital, aren't they?
Yes.
Because without that, then it almost feels hopeless.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then once we start reimagining, as you rightly point out, children, they have amazing capacities to reimagine and creatively sort of ideate new worlds with new possibilities. And gosh, we need them, you know?
Yes.
Ng Hau, Christine Elers, it's been my pleasure to have you chat with me. This is the first care conversation in the series, so you're incredibly brave in doing this. And to our audience, we will continue to have these conversations. Hope you will join us, but more importantly, please do share your thoughts, your ideas on Facebook as comments, and that's also part of building the voice democracy. We look forward to learning and developing strategies so that we can co-create a just imaginary. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.